Hello, I'm Reverend Ron Ferris. Welcome to the North Shore Unitarians of Canada's Sunday service. This is Lily Bustamante, our brass hippo, and in honor of Father's Day, I'm being assisted by one of my daughters in the filming of these opening words. Cora's helping me. You want to say hi, Cora?
Hello.
Okay, come back to me now. All right. So happy Father's Day.
It was always on your life one.
Oh, okay. Happy Father's Day to all you fathers and father figures out there. We have a special service today. Bruce Gerson is going to be speaking to us about some wisdom experiences that he's had around fatherhood. And before we get to that, I just want to welcome more thoughts on the wisdom of fathering, particularly our memories of our fathers or people who have been father figures in our lives, the good, maybe the not so good advice and wisdom that they've shared with us in our lifetimes. And so I want to kick it over to our service associate this morning, Ryan Gunther, and ask him, Ryan, what is the best, or at least most immediately memorable, piece of advice that your father or father figure ever gave you?
Oh boy, that's actually a tough one, because one thing I definitely got from my dad is a terrible memory. So I don't actually remember my dad ever giving me advice. I assume he did, and some of it probably shaped my whole life, but the words themselves are lost to the mists of time. One thing I remember is a story from before I was born. And I'll preface this for people who don't know me. I grew up in a log cabin in the woods, a mile from any other people and 25 miles from the town of Prince Rupert. This story takes place before that house was built on a different island in the same area. My dad had just moved to this house and decided that he wanted to explore the island, and so he hiked to the other side of the island to camp overnight. But this is the North Coast, and this was one of the 250 days out of the year that it rains there, so he got soaked. So he made a fire and strung up a line to dry out his clothes. But he was feeling a little more ambitious than that, and this was early in his pioneering life, and the romance of homesteading hadn't worn off yet, so he decided to whittle some clothespins out of sticks. And as he was splitting one of the sticks, the knife slipped, and he sliced his finger to the bone. It was already too late to hike back that night, and he didn't want to try to hike through the woods in the dark, so he bandaged it as best he could, and slept overnight as he'd planned, and then hiked back out the next day and went to the doctor to get stitches. The doctor was amazed that he had wandered into the woods by himself and gotten in trouble and then took care of it by himself. And he said, "What would you have done if you'd broken your leg?" And my dad said, "Well, I guess I would have improvised a splint and a crutch as best I could and limped back out." What I learned from that story was not that you should never cut towards your hand, although that would be good advice. But no, that's a lesson that I learned the old-fashioned way when I sliced my own finger to the bone. What I learned from that story and from my dad in general was just an attitude of self-reliance. When something happens, you don't just sit down and wait for help to arrive that may never arrive. You figure it out. Last year, I got a flat tire for the first time in my life, and it didn't even occur to me until months later that I am paying every year for roadside assistance, and I could have called somebody to come fix it for me or tow my car to the shop for free. No, I watched a YouTube video on my phone, and I figured out how to change a tire on my own. And so this morning, I dedicate the lighting of our flaming chalice to my dad and to your dad, and all the lessons they taught us even when they weren't trying to give advice. We kindle this flame as a symbol of our gathering. May the light of understanding illuminate our darkness. May the warmth of sharing bring us peace. We are the North Shore Unitarian Church, and our mission is to empower people to live with greater depth, meaning, and purpose. If this is one of your first times participating in our Sunday service, make sure you click the link in the notes so we can bring you into our community. And also, we'd love for you to say hi in the comments. You'll find a warm welcome, I'm sure. In this community, we celebrate people from all walks of life, no matter how you make your living or how you experience the sacred. No matter who you are or who you love, we hope you will feel welcome. It's good to be together.
I'll keep you safe. Try hard to concentrate. Hold out your hand. Can you feel the weight of it? The whole world at your fingertips. Don't be afraid. Our mistakes, they were bound to be made, but I promise you I'll keep you safe. You'll be an architect, so pull up your sleeves and build a new silhouette in the skylines up ahead. And don't be afraid. I'll keep you safe. Your darkness will be rewritten to a work of fiction you'll see. As you pull on every ribbon, you find every secret it keeps. The sound of the branches breaking under your feet, the smell of the falling and burning of leaves, the bitterness of winter or the sweetness of spring. You are an artist, but your heart is your masterpiece, and I'll keep it safe. Dismiss the invisible by giving it shape. Like a clockmaker fixes time by keeping the gears in line. Don't be, no, don't be afraid. God knows the mistakes will be made, but I promise you I'll keep you safe. As you build up your collection of pearls that you pull from the deep, a landscape more beautiful than anything that I've ever seen. The sound of the branches breaking under your feet, the smell of the falling and burning of leaves, the bitterness of winter or the sweetness of spring. You are an artist, but your heart is your masterpiece, and I'll keep it safe.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're all bearing up out there wherever you are. Glad to be connecting with you today. I'm Bruce Grierson, and I can't wait until I get a chance to see some of you again in the flesh. It won't be too long. We're in phase 2 now, baby. All right. In the meantime, I have a little story that I want to share with you. It's actually a story that a colleague of mine told. It's kind of his origin story as a writer. So this guy, whose name is Gar, when he was in high school, he really was into sports, and he thought he might actually try to be a varsity athlete. That's how into it he was. But he was just a little guy, too small and too skinny to really make that happen. It became pretty clear. So he decided that instead of playing sports, he would write about sports for a little local newspaper. And the editor said, great, happy to have you. There's just one thing. We can't afford to pay you. So that wasn't ideal, but eventually they came to an agreement. One byline a week, $20 a week for Gar. So at the end of each month, he would go out to the mailbox, and there was an envelope full of 4 $20 bills wrapped in a rubber band. Now, it wasn't until he got back to Boston that he learned the truth. The newspaper hadn't actually been paying him anything. His father had been putting that envelope in the mailbox because he didn't want to crush his son's dream. And it worked, because by now, Gar had all the confidence that he needed, and he went on to become a very fine writer. So, it's Father's Day, and I feel like this is a holiday that has a little asterisk by it. I don't feel like there's full buy-in to the holiday of Father's Day. I mean, Mother's Day, yes. Mother's Day has a very strong spine. I mean, it's got the history in the peace movement. It was created by a woman who fought to get a calendar holiday to commemorate, to to recognize the sacrifices mothers make for their kids. And she got that holiday, but then she became so disgusted. This is a story for another day. She became so disgusted with how commercial it had all become that she spent the last decade of her life fighting to get it scrubbed from the calendar. I mean, that's all great stuff. I mean, Mother's Day, yes. Mother's Day is unassailable. It's got a very strong spine. I mean, it's got its history in the peace movement. It was created by a woman who fought to get a calendar holiday honoring the sacrifices that mothers make for their children. And she got her holiday, and then she became so disgusted with how commercial it had all become that she spent the last decade of her life fighting to get it scrubbed from the calendar. That's a story for another time. But Mother's Day, man, nobody doubts it. Fathers, on the other hand, I mean, what have fathers done to deserve special recognition? You know, gallivanting around, basically. Working till late and then coming home and tucking the kids in, you know, the conquering hero. But, so that's, you know, but I would argue that there's a lot that fathers quietly do that kind of doesn't make it onto the scoreboard. I mean, a fair bit of dad work doesn't actually get noticed till later, like Gar's dad and those envelopes. Or it maybe doesn't get noticed at all. A lot of dad work happens behind the curtain. And so I'm hoping today we can change that. Let's part the curtain and let's bring fathers out from behind it for their day in the sun. Let the father freak flag fly. Let a million dad jokes bloom. I'm sorry, we don't serve time travelers here, said the bartender. A time traveler walks into a bar. Dad joke. So when I was 18 and just finishing up my first year of university, I had one of those dope moments. I realized, geez, it's almost the end of May and I've totally forgotten to line up a summer job. I'd been too busy trying not to flunk out of the pre-med program that I was inexplicably enrolled in, which was a terrible fit for me and was totally overwhelming me. It was like I had this trifecta of loserdom going, you know, borderline flunking out, no summer job, and I'm still living at home with my parents, up in my old bedroom with the Bjorn Borg poster on the wall. Not too cool. So by this time, all the good jobs were snapped up, and all that was left for me to do was sort of slump down to the manpower office, as they called it in those days, the unemployment office, and check out the casual labor board. So this was a posting of all the short-term minimum wage jobs. I mean, real donkey work. These are the kind of jobs that really should only be Plan A if you have a criminal record. And even here, the pickings were slim. But there was one job that kind of jumped out. Mascot. I looked at the fine print. Hormel Foods is looking for a high-energy individual to help us celebrate the grand opening of a new Red Rooster convenience store in East Edmonton. Successful applicant must have, yada, yada, yada. So basically the job was to attract foot traffic, to basically you stand out in front of the store and bust a few dance moves dressed as a chicken. So I applied for the job and immediately was hired. There actually didn't seem to be any other candidates, which should have been a red flag right there. Now it happened that A heat wave descended on Alberta, record-breaking heat that weekend, of course, there was record-breaking heat. And by 8 a.m. when I started my shift on that Saturday morning, it was already smoking hot. So I put on the suit and I stake out my little patch of sidewalk in front of the store, and it doesn't take long for the welcome committee to show up. Hey, chicken. Now I should say, this was a part of town that realtors would call emerging. I mean, it was the rough part of town, and these were scarier kids than I was accustomed to. Hey, chicken wings. I thought, okay, Bruce, just stick with your process here. Be the chicken. You got this. The first rock hits me in the back, and I sort of swing around and lower my great big wash tub sized head in defense like a bison as the rest of the rocks come sort of fusillading in, boom, 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 boom. And I'm feeling very alone out there on the sidewalk, and at one point I look over and the door to the store opens and the manager pokes his head out, and he's sort of hit with a blast of heat that kind of lifts his toupee. He turns around and scuttles back inside his air-conditioned cave, leaving me to my defenses out on the sidewalk again, and the stoning resumes. That night at dinner, my dad says grace. Lord, bless this food to our use and us to thy service. In Christ's name, amen. And then he looks up and he kind of sunnily says, so, how'd it go today? And to everybody's surprise, mostly mine, I start to cry. And I tell him about the heat and the rocks and my little chicken feet sticking to the pavement. And I said, but you know, the worst of it is, I have to go out there tomorrow and do it all again. A kind of compassionate silence descends upon the dining room. And then my dad breaks it by bringing his hand down on the table. No, you don't, he says. I said, well, Dad, actually I do. I mean, the deal was 2 days, the Saturday and the Sunday. And he says, you're not putting that suit on tomorrow. And I say, because? He goes, because I am. He goes, yeah, look, we're about the same size, right, you and I? Okay, so here's how it's going to go. Tomorrow, we drive down there together, you go inside, put on the suit, and I'll meet you out in the parking lot, and we'll pull a switcheroo. Now, I know how you want the rest of this story to go, but I'll tell you how it did go. I never took my dad up on that offer to wear the chicken suit for me. To me, it was enough that he had made that offer, and I knew he was dead serious about it. When he said that, it was like somebody had attached booster cables to my ears, and I got this jolt of courage, and I went out there the next day, and I did my shift, and what kept me going was the thought of this 60-something-year-old guy, sort of sneakily incognito in this suit, rolling out dance moves not seen since the 40s, and just generally bringing a whole new level of professionalism to being a chicken. And those kids, they didn't even show up the second day. It was too hot for them. They couldn't hack it. And I finished my shift, and I went and I cashed my check from Hormel Foods for $84, and I felt like a king. Now, two things changed for me after that day. One was I switched majors. I got out of the hard sciences and into social science and eventually into creative writing. The second thing was, never again was I heard to grumble, oh, I'm going to university and I gotta live with my parents. I thought, you know what? I don't have to live with these people. I thought, you know what? I don't have to live with these people. I get to live with them. I know that sounds corny, but that's actually what I thought. Because we never know how long we have with each other. It turned out that not long after the chicken incident, my dad started not feeling very well, and he went to get checked out, and the diagnosis was chronic myelogenous leukemia. And within 10 months, he was gone. And not a day goes by that I don't think about him 31 years later. And I am so grateful for those extra months we got together, just hanging out and playing ping pong. And I don't know if I kind of had an inkling that something was going to happen, but I remember just soaking him in, the lesson of him. There's a lot going on behind the curtain in this life. We don't know the half of it. And I'm not even sure it's our job to try to understand. It may be enough to kind of honor the mystery of it. You keep going to the mailbox, you keep putting on the chicken suit, and maybe the dumb, simple rituals of life set something in motion and grace comes in through the back door eventually. Maybe. Did I mention it's Father's Day? I have a little homework assignment for you. If you're lucky enough to still have a father, appreciate the heck out of him today. Tell him what you have to tell him. Even if it's over Zoom, even if it's over the phone, just say what you need to say. And if you don't have a father, tonight at the dinner table, pour 2 glasses, one for you and one for him, and say what I would say to my dad. Dad, you were a family man before that was even a thing. Thank you for the sacrifices you made. Thank you. And happy Father's Day. This poem is called Those Winter Sundays. It's by Robert Hayden. Sundays too my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold, and then with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices?
Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of living, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
I've broken my vows 1,000 times.
You've broken your vows 1,000 times. We've broken our vows 1,000 times.
I've broken my vows 1,000 times.
As we settle in for a moment of meditative prayer, let us be mindful that today is the solstice, the summer solstice, the first day of summer. And that cultures throughout the history of humankind have celebrated days such as this and this very day as a marker of time, as a celebration of life. And so, if you would pray with me with that in mind, we could say, thank you, sun, for your light and energy. Thank you, earth, for our bodies, for pulling us close to you. Thank you, air, for showing us how the spirit moves, and thank you, water, for life. And today we can see the interplay of all those primal elements. They're interweaving, standing for the interconnected and dependent web of existence. We can look about us in gratitude and stand in that gratitude as an inspiration to move into the world with a generous spirit. We pray for the well-being of all beings. We pray for peace in the land, peace in our hearts. We give thanks for all the wisdom passed to us by our forefathers, by our fathers and father figures, by our ancestors, even as we endeavor to redeem them for their missteps. We acknowledge them as inspirations and wisdom keepers, and think ahead to those who will come after us. For all of our mistakes, may we be quick to seek forgiveness, so that forgiveness may be our way, and for all the grace in our lives, and I don't know what else there is, may we be ever grateful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Let all the beauty we have known illuminate our hearts and minds, rejoice in wonders daily shown, in faith and joy and love that binds. We celebrate with singing hearts the loneliness of sky and earth, the inspiration of the music and its poetry, surround and bless our thought our days. For this we sing in harmony, together giving thanks and praise.
Thank you. We are a busy congregation with a lot going on, so please read your weekly e-bulletin. And here are a few things I particularly want to draw your attention to. Please join us after the service for our virtual coffee hour via Zoom. The coffee is virtual, the conversation is very real. Our outreach recipient in June is Raven, a legal advocacy organization which supports First Nations in protecting their ancestral lands and the environment. You can donate via e-transfer or by mailing a check to the church. And please be sure to write Raven in the memo. In these dispersed times, electronic communication is all we have, so if you haven't already signed up to receive the weekly e-bulletin, you should contact Jani immediately. This week will be the last installment of our midweek ministry before September on Wednesday at 12:30. If you join live, you'll be able to interact via the comments. Otherwise, you can watch it at your leisure on the church's YouTube channel. Thank you for your participation in these activities and for your attention. We hope that you found today's service interesting and meaningful and will join us again. If you haven't yet done so, please subscribe and leave a comment. And now, please join me as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but carry with us the light of vision and the warmth of hope. The world calls us to live with depth, meaning, and purpose. We go forth with courage and love.
So now as we leave this sacred time and space, well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge my assistant who's helping me with these closing remarks and benediction. It's Minnie Belfair.
Hi.
So I hope you all are going to have already had, are having a wonderful Father's Day. And so as we leave this sacred time, this sacred place, let us go with the knowledge and wisdom shared by our fathers and father figures, and hearing their voices as we step into the week and seeing through their eyes and through the wisdom that they bequeathed to us. So let us go in peace and let us go singing. Happy Father's Day.